Oh, happy Final Four Friday, South Carolina, NC State. We are just under 2 hours away from tip-off, actually under 90 minutes away from tip-off as South Carolina looks to punch their ticket to make it back to the finals to try to win their third championship in program history. Intern Joe's with us. Chris Wilbon is in Cleveland to break it all down. He's been there the last couple of days, and we'll hear from Chris on some of the breakdown of it. I'm Mike Huber. We'll have some other guests along the way for the next 60 minutes as we gear you up for tonight's matchup in Cleveland. Without further ado, Chris, you've been there the last couple of days. You've had a chance to listen to the players. You've had to listen to Dawn. What is just your overall thoughts on this matchup? Because this is deja vu in a sense. They were here last year, but at the same time, too, you've heard from Dawn. Not the same team. Doesn't feel the same, though, for her, she says.
Yeah, some of them were here last year, but it does not feel like it at all. This is the new experience for almost all of them. Camilla and Raven were the only ones that really played that much last year, and even then they were in dramatically different roles. So it does not feel like last year at all. Last year, the team, in retrospect, was very tight. Part of it was just their mentality of being very professional and very focused. But in retrospect, now we can tell they were tight. They were feeling the pressure of going undefeated. They were feeling the pressure of all this external stuff that they got caught up with through no fault of their own. And the pressure of trying to go back-to-back undefeated, going out, as one of the greatest classes ever. Obviously, all that pressure is non-existent this year. Is there pressure of going undefeated? I'm not sure this team feels the pressure. They're so loose. They're so goofy. They're so just nonchalant about everything. I didn't get the sense that they felt pressure about going undefeated. They're undefeated, but they're like the third or fourth story here. So maybe that adds into it.
Chris, do you feel like with this year's team that we talked about the undefeated record on the line, trying to become the 10th team in NCAA history to do that on the women's side of things? At some point, you have to start to think about that. Do you feel like they're starting to realize it, or is this team really just taking it one game at a time?
I don't think that's really. I don't think they're thinking about it yet. If they should win tonight and then come Sunday, then I think definitely they'll be thinking about it. But right now, it's not a happy to be here necessarily, but they're happy. They're always happy. And to some extent, they can't even conceive of the fact that they might lose. They think they're going to win everything.
Joe, anything stand out to you when we asked Chris maybe just some keys for the game?
Yeah, I mean, Chris, obviously NC State, matching up with South Carolina pretty well. What are your keys? What are you looking for? Is this game going to be fought out in the front court or back court? What are you kind of looking for through the keys throughout this one?
Throughout the postseason, the first thing I'm looking at with South Carolina is turnovers, because they've had the games this year where they lose focus and can't hold on to the ball. We saw it up in Connecticut against Utah early in the season. We saw it in Greenville in the SEC quarterfinals against Texas A&M. And what's frustrating for Dawn Staley is that they're all self-inflicted turnovers. It's not what the other team is doing. So that's why you can tell a lot about their mindset by whether or not they're taking care of the ball. The team, I agree, the teams match up very well. I think most of NC State's production comes from the backcourt, but I think the key player for them is River Baldwin, because she only averages, I think, 10 points and a little under 7 rebounds, but when she's playing well and she's on the court, she gives them balance that they don't have otherwise, and she creates space for all those guards, especially Isaiah James, to create and score points.
Chris, one player in particular that Gamecock fans know pretty well because she was part of that 2022 championship team, Tanaya Rivers on NC State. She'll be going up against her old team tonight. having a pretty decent season with the transition going on over there. I think she's averaging just around 12 points, something like that. What do you get a sense of? You've had a chance to talk to some of the players for South Carolina. What is that like? I mean, you're going up against one of your old teammates, especially someone that was part of a championship team.
Yeah, Sanaya Rivers is the only one on NC State that has any Final Four experience, so that's valuable. She didn't play a lot in the national championship game in 2022, but she had a big role in beating Louisville in the semifinals. So people forget she committed during COVID. She didn't get to take all her visits and get to know all of her potential teams. So she was a huge fan of Asia Wilson. That's why she wears number 22. So she kind of committed off of that. And once she got to South Carolina, she realized it wasn't really the right place for her. She wanted to be a little closer to home. And there's no bad blood, no animosity. Dawn said that she still texts with Sanaya and her mother. The players still check in on her from time to time, congratulate her after big games. They're not particularly close, but there's, like I said, there's no animosity. I did, after the Elite Eight game, I was in the locker room post game while NC State was playing Texas. And I watched the second half, specifically the third quarter, with one of the teammates that came in with Sanaya. And we were just watching and talking about her progression. And she was like, I know they got this. I know Sanaya is going to make sure they win.
Chris, one thing that I saw with your couple things to watch for. You posted this on Gamecock Central. If you're not a subscriber to GC, sign up today for just $1. You can read content for not just women's basketball, football, baseball, everything else in between. But one thing that you wrote about today, 5 things to watch. You wrote relax, and then you wrote don't relax. Those are 2 of your keys, relax and don't relax. So explain to people who didn't have a chance maybe to see your story what you mean by that.
Well, like we mentioned earlier, last season they were tight at the start. And then when Aaliyah got in foul trouble, they got tighter. So they need to come out relaxed and play their game. And just, I think on paper, they're the more talented team. They're an 11.5-point favorite. So I'm not going out on a limb by saying that. So they just need to come out, relax, don't let the moment get to them. We've seen at certain times some of the freshmen and young players get a little rattled. Full Wiley had a bad game in the SEC quarterfinals. Tessa had a bad game in the opening round. So they just need to relax, do what they do. But at the same time, in the last 2 rounds, we saw them build double-digit third-quarter leads and then have to hold on at the end because they relaxed too much. So they have to walk that fine line between not getting stressed and uptight and being themselves and not, but at the same time, not being too easygoing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Dawn Staley obviously was a guard herself. One thing that is going to be, key, at least from my eyes, is the guard play. How do you foresee South Carolina matching up with NC State guard-wise? And then, what is another, key? Like, how do you stay or stop yourself from looking ahead to the national championship game?
Well, I think it helps that you don't know if you win, you don't know who you're going to play yet. So you can't look forward to an opponent that doesn't exist yet. Obviously, it's going to be a huge story whether you're going against Caitlin Clark in Iowa and you're looking for revenge, or whether you're going against UConn, the standard bearer with Paige and Gino, and sort of the old guard versus the new guard. But you can't focus on that yet because you don't know which story it's going to be. So I think that I do think that helps. We were actually we were discussing it, some of the other beat writers and I. It's something like 4 or 5 years in a row that the 7 o'clock tip winner has won the national championship. So there seems to be something about playing the late game that throws people off a little bit.
Chris, I don't know if it's maybe people like myself. I know that there's other people that probably feel this way, but tell me if I'm wrong. I feel like when you look at these 4 teams, maybe NC State's the team that's just getting written off the most. Maybe some people are just assuming South Carolina will be in the championship. But because of Caitlin Clark, because you have Paige, because you got UConn, you got Gino, even though South Carolina is undefeated, it feels like from an attention standpoint, the attention is, elsewhere. It's not all on a team that you would feel like would have the most attention, the undefeated team. If you agree with it, I feel like that's kind of helping this team in terms of not having that same type of pressure in comparison to what most undefeated teams in the spot would face.
Yeah, absolutely. There's nobody in there talking about. Last year, we were all talking about you got a chance to be the 10th undefeated team in NCAA history. I don't recall them having to answer that question once this weekend. It might have come up, but it wasn't when I was around. It's just not. It hasn't come up yet. Now again, if they win tonight, I'm sure it will come up a lot tomorrow. But right now, it's just nationally, everyone's focused on Caitlin versus Paige and Iowa and what they've done, and it's like, oh yeah, there's also a team that's 36-0 over here that's favored to win it all.
Do you have anything for Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I guess Wilbon, one more thing on the way out. I brought up the guards earlier, but it's going to be, the spark off the bench that seems to really get it done for South Carolina in the postseason. If you could give us one or two players to watch tonight off the bench or just in general, because, I mean, this whole roster is made up of starters. Who are you watching to potentially make the biggest impact in this game?
Yeah, and I didn't answer your question earlier, but I think the player to watch is Wiley. Because I think she's due for a breakout. She didn't play particularly well in Albany. She's the sort of player that when she doesn't play well, that just gives her all the more motivation to come out and do something. And I think she could be the key to defending NC State's guards because she's so quick and physical, especially against a bigger player like Sanaya Rivers, that I think she can really cause some problems for NC State.
All right, Chris, before I let you go, what you got, Joe?
I was going to say, one more thing. Tessa Johnson cooked last weekend. I think that, Full Wiley's due, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's like whoever. The thing is, Dawn's going to ride the hot hand. And last weekend it was Tessa, but I think this weekend is going to be Malaysia.
All right, Chris, one last thing before we let you get going. Just final thoughts on this matchup. We've kind of talked about everything in terms of what South Carolina needs to do, the opposition, the pressure, maybe the lack thereof in comparison to last year. Just your overall thoughts before we get ready for tonight's game.
I think it's an interesting matchup. NC State's the proverbial hot team at the right time, but there's a big talent gap, and that's not to disrespect the Wolfpack in any way. They're very talented. They've been good all season, but they really don't. They don't have the depth of talent that South Carolina can throw at them, and their margin for error, even when they're successful, is much smaller.
Well, he's Chris Wilbon. Be sure to follow his work over on Gamecock Central. He'll have the live feed up if you want to be able to know exactly what's going on, the stuff that you don't see from a TV presence standpoint. He'll have it up on the message board. If you're not a subscriber, again, sign up for just $1. Can't beat that. Lisa Grant, in addition, has also been doing some coverage for Gamecock Central throughout the tournament, so hopefully we'll have some more coverage from Grant and Chris going into Sunday. Enjoy the game tonight, Chris. Appreciate you, buddy.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Wilbon. Right.
He's Chris Wilbon. He's out in Cleveland. You can hear the music started to bump out there. Home of the Cavaliers. The Cavs play.
Yeah, absolutely. Wilbon, doing an awesome job, boots on the ground there in Cleveland. Again, I love the comment from Alex because Wilbon's everywhere, man. Anything you need about this women's basketball team, Wilbon's got it. Doing a great job for us at Central.
He does, and I'm actually looking at some of the things that Chris wrote for Gamecock Central today, scouting the Wolfpack. We talked a little bit about them before. Since Sanaya Rivers, the former Gamecock guard, will be playing for the Wolfpack. She'll be playing for NC State tonight against her old team. And as Chris mentioned, she's the only one on this team for NC State that has Final Four experience. Now, she didn't have a lot of experience when she played for South Carolina during that 2022 championship season where they played in Minnesota, but She is having a pretty nice season, averaging 12.7 points, 6.2 rebounds, just shy of 4 assists. So when we look at the Wolfpack, if you're not familiar with them, South Carolina didn't play them this year, so you might not know as much about them in comparison to years past when South Carolina does play NC State, which it feels like they do every couple of years. It's like off and on. Isaiah James, she's a guard. She's been having a breakout tournament for NC State. You know, she scored at least 19 points in every game of the tournament, Chris writes, and a career high 29 against Stanford. James is averaging 16.7 points and 4.6 rebounds a game. So when you look at trying to eliminate top scorers for the opposition, it starts with James. It starts with someone like Rivers. You need to be able to slow them down. And I think from a defensive standpoint, when you look at this, right, we talk about what South Carolina is able to do from an offensive standpoint. You think back to that second round matchup. That's one that really stands out to me. That's the one that really stands out to me. What they were able to do against North Carolina. They were able to catch fire from behind the arc. I mean, they were just draining threes for crying out loud to a point where I think I saw one stat. If South Carolina didn't score a basket the entire second half of that game against North Carolina, they still would have won the game because of what they did in the first half. But I bring that up because when you keep getting deep into the tournament, when you keep getting deep and you're in the Final Four now, and I remember being out of Minnesota covering that 2022 championship season. I remember covering that 2017 Asia Wilson team when they won their first championship in program history. At this point of the season, defense really needs to crank up because every possession now becomes even that much more valuable. So we've seen South Carolina in some of these games, even going back to that SEC tournament. There were some games where they were leading by maybe 15, 18, 20 plus points. I think it was 23 at some point against Tennessee. And then teams started to whittle it away. We saw that just last week against Oregon State. So I bring that up because offensively, we've seen South Carolina do good things right from the jump. We've seen that. Tonight, and that's not to say I don't want to see them do good things offensively, but tonight I really want to see them set the tone defensively. We've seen it in a couple games, but tonight it is going to be crucial. It is going to be crucial. And if they can do that, Joe, right from the beginning, especially being able to slow down James and being able to slow down Rivers, because it's not the same. It's not the same trying to compare her situation to someone like Jermaine Couisnard, but I bring that up because the last thing the Gamecock fan base needs is any type of revenge game, if you want to call it that. Slow down those two players, and I think everything else will take care of itself.
Yeah, I agree fully. You know, I think this weekend is this team's weekend, right? I think last weekend they kind of came out flat. We're looking a little bit ahead because you still had, Iowa. LSU still looming. Potentially that game was still on the horizon when they were playing last weekend. So no distractions now. You're in the end game, right? You're in the Final Four. So, I think you just focus on the task at hand now, and then you get to play one more game against, either Iowa or UConn. So I think they're ready for either of those two teams. I think, last season, the revenge game, all of those storylines against Iowa would be a great game. Don, I talked about it on 107.5 The Game a little bit earlier this morning, but I think, Don was ready for Iowa last year. The shooting just went a little bit cold, right? So I think they have a defensive game plan for Caitlin Clark. They just need to execute it now, and they have a little bit better guard play. And then the depth, right? Like Wellbaum mentioned, I think that's the biggest story with this team. Depth is so good. It's elite, Mike. It really is. And I don't think, it's hard to compare it to other sports too, but like the depth, you have players that could start anywhere else and likely be a top two scorer. We're seeing that with Rivers too. When you go somewhere else, but this team really, really, really deep. And, now that, I think, that especially last weekend after, performing the way you did, escaping all the way you did, I think, this team is loose. They're ready to go. And when this team is loose, Mike, this is my last point here, but I think, when this team is loose, they're having fun. That's when they're the most locked in, oddly enough. I guess that's ironic in and of itself, but it's true. And I think, a lot of people can agree with that, when this is having fun, because as young as they are too, right? I think when this team is having fun, they're at their best. So as loose as Dawn has been the last couple of days, I think it should give you a pretty good indication of where they're at.
So Big Red asks, in your opinion, what will be the best matchup in this game? We know with what South Carolina has at guard play, they'll probably change things up throughout the game. They're not just going to keep the same matchup. And I mentioned James and Rivers. I'm interested just to see who South Carolina puts on James. I feel like Raven Johnson is certainly one of those players that you could put on her for the reasons of what Raven has done defensively this season. I mean, she leads the team in steals, averaging 2 steals a game. But I also think you could see Pau go on her as well. And I think we can see some of those matchups get flipped around. You might see Raven on Rivers, right? You might see Pau on James. And then, throw in the fact that you got some other play from guards there. I mean, we got Bree Hall there. So Malaysia comes in. Certainly she gives you a spark in a lot of ways. Defensively, she's averaging just over a 1.5 steals a game. So I think what we'll see with South Carolina, especially if Dawn is feeling confident enough with some of the players I just mentioned, and that's just some. I mean, we can keep going down the list here. But if she's feeling confident enough, being able to keep those legs fresh, right? I mean, you look at the minutes of what South Carolina has done, and throughout the course of the season, we've seen it, where she's gained more confidence in some of these younger players. And that happens, right? That happens. But on top of it all, this is such a good team that, they've been playing some of their best basketball. They've been playing their best basketball throughout the course of the season, but they continue to get better in these small little areas that might not necessarily show up in the stat sheet. And what I'm talking about is when you have some of the younger players, or you have some of these players who were in roles, like they had limited roles last season, but their growth has continued to blossom because now this is their team because of all the players that left last year. Starting 5, I mean, goodness, the freshies, the number of players that were drafted last year. So I think more than anything, you go with, okay, who's playing hot? Who's playing hot? On top of that, the other part of it is staying out of foul trouble. So I think those are the 2 big things for me. I mean, we look back, not to bring up PTSD moments here, but you look back to last year against Iowa in this situation, and Aaliyah Boston getting into foul trouble early, and some of them were questionable, but it's over with. It is what it is. It's over a year ago. That certainly changed up South Carolina's game plan of what they wanted to do. So we'll wait and see. I got a question here saying, why aren't you guys there? Chris Wilbon is there. Wilbon is there for us. He just joined us. So if you just missed his segment, a lot of great stuff. He's inside the arena. We could hear the music going on in the background. He's there. We're back here. We're going to be able to provide you guys updates as far as what's going on. But Gamecock Central, just like it's always been, we're covering you guys everything, not just women's basketball. We have football going on, baseball, big weekend for baseball coming up. We have you covered on every angle. So you'll be able to get every ounce of Gamecock content. Football's going on as well. Every ounce of Gamecock content with literally all of us just all over the place. But Chris is in Cleveland tonight, and we'll continue to provide the best coverage out there for you guys, win or lose tonight. Hopefully it'll be a win, and hopefully it'll be a long weekend for the Gamecocks so we can continue to provide more women's basketball coverage all weekend long. Any thoughts, though, on that? I don't know if there's any matchups in particular or player that I mentioned.
No, I'm looking. I mean, Mike, you kind of hit the nail on the head there. Because Dawn, I mean, with her guards, especially with the matchups, she likes to tweak, really likes to tweak and mess with it, provide different looks well late in the game, too. By the time she has like an established, like, all right, guard this person, it's like kind of into the third quarter, start of the fourth quarter. So I think that's what makes her brilliant, right? And all of the guards are capable of it. You mentioned Pau. Pau is really underrated on defense. And I mean, Evan can do it. Wiley can do it. Tessa can even do it too. James has a little bit of size on Tessa Johnson, but I mean, I think Wiley matches up well again with her length. And then Wiley on Rivers too will be interesting to see. Mike
Beverly, I like that comment. Yeah. I mean, just the way Wiley plays, and I've mentioned it before, going back to my days when I worked at Watch Fox covering Wiley when she was friggin' an 8th grader, just balling out at Keenan. And obviously she just continued to get better and better. And certainly she's continued to get better throughout the course of the season since she arrived here as a true freshman. But I'd like that matchup. Personally, I'd like that matchup. I'd like to see Wiley get under Rivers' skin a little bit. I think that'd be fun to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think, as soon as the whistle blows, these two teams are, friends again. And, I like the way that Rivers and Dawn both, I mean, handled themselves when asked the question, right, about each other, and just shows you too, what happens, when you handle yourself well on the way out. You look at Gilbert Edmond for football. The door's always open, and friendships last if you leave the correct way.
Yep. No, I think again the guard play. That's where it's going to be one. And John's asking if there's anyone that NC State has that can match up with Cardoso. When I look at this team, I don't think there's anyone that really can. Because when you look at NC State, they're mainly a team that has, and as Chris wrote about this on Gamecock Central, the guards have really grabbed most of the headlines. But if there's going to be one, if you just want to, just for the sake of conversation, potentially, that would be River Baldwin. She's been an important player for them as well. So I think this game is going to be won by the guards. But, obviously, if you're someone like Cardoso, if you're South Carolina, take advantage of that. And Big Red brings it up. Take advantage of the fact that you have a matchup that you feel like you should be able to win. At least that's how I'm feeling. I mean, no disrespect to River Baldwin. She's 6'5". Trying to pull up her stats right now to be able to give you guys an idea of what she's been doing. See if we get some averages here for you. She has been she averages about, just over 10 points a game. So if I'm South Carolina defensively, talking about NC State's offense, I'm not necessarily worried about her killing you in the paint from a defensive standpoint. But on the flip side of it, yeah, like Big Red said, go down to the paint. And if you do that, as Tiger Kem just mentioned, Baldwin foul trouble would be huge. It would be incredible. So, again, I don't think Baldwin, I don't think NC State in general, just because the way they play through their guards. It all starts with their guards. It all finishes with their guards. They're not really a team that relies heavily on their bigs. So take advantage of that when you're on offense, but defensively on the flip side of it, know that, okay, they're not going to try to go to Baldwin that much. She'll get hers. She'll get her buckets. She's not going to kill you, though. She's not going to – if South Carolina loses tonight, and I'm not trying to speak this into existence, but if South Carolina were to lose tonight, it's not because of the way that Baldwin plays. If they were to lose, it's because of the way that NC State's guards play. So that's what I would say about that matchup.
Yeah, most definitely, Mike. I think, Kitts, again, Taman makes a point. Chloe Kitts off the bench. And Kitts is very diverse, right? She's able to, play a real 94 feet. And I think that versatility off the bench is really, really vital to this team, and can cause a lot of matchup problems for other teams too, because, again, she can shoot. She can drive, she can hit mid-range. So again, and then Watkins can shoot a little bit too. Doesn't like to necessarily shoot the three ball, but she's great defensively. I think that causes a lot of problems when you have a guy like Watkins, coming in and stepping up on defense. I think it just pushes guards to just go even more, because right when Watkins takes care of the defensive ends and gets the ball forward, you just get to run an offense, and defense generates offense. And if they play fundamentally sound on the defensive end, they will have a lot more chances offensively.
Joe, we've talked about this throughout the course of the season. I think we mentioned it when they won the SEC championship a couple weeks back. While Dawn Staley and maybe some of the players felt optimistic about this year's team, we've talked about it, that before the start of the season, I think it would have been fair to say realistically, okay, maybe this team takes a step back simply because they lost a lot of talent from the year before. They lost the freshies. Maybe they get back to the Sweet 16. Maybe they get back to the Elite Eight. But they're back in this Final Four situation. And we've talked about it before, too, with Dawn Staley winning another Coach of the Year honor. 3 straight years being able to do that. This is arguably her best job she has ever done. As the course of the season continued to play out and the wins continued to pile up, and maybe if anyone had any questions about this team, those quickly went out the window. And it gets back to a point where it's like, all right, this is South Carolina. We expect them now to get to the Final Four. Once things started really rolling, once you got into February, you're still undefeated. So I bring that up because this is the 4th straight year that this Gamecock team has been in the Final Four. And yet, completely different starting lineup. And I know that's just been something that's been said over and over and over, and it's a broken record at this point. Where I'm going with all this, Joe, is this is something that Gamecock fans have grown accustomed to, despite the fact maybe at the beginning of the season, some questions with this team. But once things start rolling, it's like, wait a minute, this wasn't going to be a rebuilding year. This was a reloading year. We're back exactly where we belong. So now they're back here. They fell up short last season. What do you just feel with this team in terms of getting to this point? Because for a lot of teams, just making it to the Final Four would be like, oh my God, this is incredible. This team, they came up short last year. I remember a couple years ago when they came up short against Stanford in that hunger. Different team. A lot of those players were back and they won it all. Do you feel like these players even think about that from last year? I mean, Cardoso, some of these players were still here from a year ago. I mean, you heard from Chris. So you just feel like the mentality is different. They don't use that as the same motivation maybe as that 2022 team did.
Oh, 100%. What Wellbaum said about this feeling like a different team, I really do think it is a different team, right? You have different leadership. I mean, Cardoso's still at the helm, but the freshies were a little bit more businesslike towards the end of their career, right? And now, so you have the new generation of leadership and, Kitts and Cardoso and Johnson and Pau. And they're a little bit more looser, right? They're having fun. So I think, the fact that they are undefeated and they're not getting talked about is what really feels different about this whole run, right? Because the last time that they were undefeated, they were the talk of the town. It was the whole thing. But now they're kind of getting slept on a little bit, which is, I don't know how that's even possible to sleep on Dawn Staley and an undefeated basketball team. But
which honestly,
here we are, right? So
that's all right though, right? Like we talked to Chris.
Exactly.
If anything, takes the pressure off them a little bit more.
Yes.
Let them talk about Caitlin Clark. Let them talk about Paige Beckers. Let them talk about Gino. And let them do all that.
Situation, Mike. It's the dream situation. And you already showed you were playing with house money for that Cardoso banked in 3, right? When Dawn said shoot it, that's when you made your deal with the devil. It's like, all right, if we win this thing, we win it. If we go undefeated, we go undefeated. That's it. Like that's how we're gonna end this thing. And if we're doing it, we're doing it. And so that's how it's been, right? They're playing with house money and they're undefeated and underrated, being slept on somehow. I don't get it, Mike. And it's a dream situation if you're South Carolina because you really just get to show out from here, right? Tell everyone why they're wrong to overlook you, and on the biggest stage in college basketball, right? So this is your time to really show everyone why they shouldn't have been sleeping on you.
Big Red, another question. Do you play more fast-paced or slow it down against a team like NC State? To me, this team has been playing fast all season. When they want to slow it down, that's when they will slow it down. But I feel like this is a team, like we've seen throughout the course of this tournament. I mean, we've seen throughout the season, but especially throughout the course of the season. I'll go back to that NC State game, that North Carolina, the UNC game in particular, where they were just up and down the court, fired. When they get in a rhythm, when this Gamecock offense gets in a rhythm and they're playing fast, other teams just can't keep up with it. So to me, play the style that you've been playing all season. If fast pace is working, keep going with it. If you need to change things up, which they have at times, change it up, slow it down. But you dictate the pace. That's the way I look at this. You're South Carolina. You're going into this game against NC State. They're a team that I think it's maybe 12.5, 13.5. I don't know where the latest line is for the spread on this game. But I say that not to overlook the Wolfpack, but you dictate the game. 11.5 is the latest line. You dictate the game. So, again, go out there, play your style of basketball, play your pace. Let NC State have to adjust to the way you're playing. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, Mike, absolutely. I mean, I think, controlling the pace from the jump is one. And then again, defense creating offensive opportunities. And if they keep playing, off each other, right? Sharing the basketball, playing off each other's vibes, keep it loose, keep it light, and just continue to roll and get out of there as quick as you can, get off your feet. I think, you should be in a pretty good spot come Sunday, and, you should be pretty feeling good about it, but got to get the job done right from the jump, right? And you can't lose sight of it either if you get up either. So I think that's another thing you got to look at, but it'll be a pretty good basketball game, Mike.
Just a reminder, South Carolina, NC State, they're going to tip off at 7 o'clock, so we're about just under 51 minutes away until tip-off at the Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse in Cleveland, Ohio. Our very own Chris Wilbon is in attendance for tonight's game for Gamecock Central. We're holding things down back in Columbia, taking care of the video side of things, making sure that we got the post-game shows, pre-game shows with this, and hopefully we'll have more shows to do this weekend as South Carolina looks to punch their ticket to make it back to the NCAA Finals, something that they did just 2 years ago. They came up short, of course, last year. They were in the situation a year ago, undefeated, came up short, weren't able to go back to the championship. But even though the situation itself, the storyline itself feels like it's all the same. We've heard from Chris. I remember Dawn talked about it. That Sunday night during the selection show, I asked her, I said, what's just different? Do you take lessons from last year? And she's like, yeah, but, and I'm paraphrasing, yeah, but because this team is just so different in a lot of ways, it just feels different. So I think more than anything, yes, they understand that they're a win away from making it back to the championship. And then if they do that, we can talk about all the what's at stake, championship, undefeated, see all that stuff. Get by tonight. But South Carolina trying to make it back to the finals and trying to win a championship. Again, that would be the third time program history if they're able to do that. But obviously they need to make it there first. They need to be able to get by NC State tonight. When you look at the Wolfpack, Joe, just the second time in program history that they've reached the Final Four. You have to go all the way back to 1998 to find the last time the Wolfpack made it to the Final Four. They have made it to the Elite Eight 3 times. Now, why am I bringing that up? Well, because that 2022 season that South Carolina won it all, NC State made it to the Elite Eight. They came up short, though. They came up short that season. They fell to UConn, 91-87 in double overtime. So the reason I bring that up is there's been changes to this roster, but there are some players still on this team who were part of that season. And shoot, even go back to the year prior to that, 2021. I mean, this was a team that came up short in the Sweet 16 to Indiana, lost by 3 points. So I'm bringing these things up because, yes, you don't have Final Four experience on this team outside of Rivers, who played for South Carolina during that 2022 season. But there are players who have been around and have seen this program truly just change. I mean, it is heading in the right direction. I mean, give Kayal credit for what she did way back in the day with the Wolfpack. But what Wes Moore has done in his tenure, I mean, he arrived there in 2013. And what he's been able to do to get this program back into a position where, I mentioned Kayal, outside of that, of some of the years when she was there, that 98 season, this is the first time the program has really been relevant again. So just to give you a sense, a lot of people aren't going to talk about NC State going into this game. Don't want to overlook them completely, but, they certainly have done a lot of good things over the last couple of years.
Yeah, most definitely, Mike. NC State, again, really good program, really good women's basketball team coming into this one, so it'll be a pretty good one.
Yep, no question about it. We're going to hit some ads real quick, and then we'll pick up the show on the other side. Tax season, Joe.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. Tax ID is an uncertain feeling you get right before doing your taxes, but you don't have to go through it alone. The tax team at Liberty Tax in Irmo, Lexington, Columbia walk you through the process, clear up any confusion, and guarantee you'll get the biggest possible refund or your money back. It's tax time. If you're in a hurry for your refund, call in the tax team. Liberty Tax there. Fast, accurate, and guaranteed. On the other hand, if you think you might be owing Uncle Sam, talk to the Liberty Tax team to make sure you're not paying more than you should owe. They'll find every possible deduction. Locally owned and operated, staffed by tax professionals from your neighborhood. Open 9 to 9 on weekdays and 9 to 5 on Saturdays with multiple service options. Store through the Liberty Tax mobile app or through their desktop portal. Make an appointment or just walk in. Give a call to upload your tax documents. When you come in your return, we'll be ready to review and sign. Give them a call on your screen right now. And if who's listening, 803-462-5576. Once again, 803-462-5576 for all of your tax needs this tax season. Mike.
And today's show is also brought to you by our good friend Clint Hammond of Movement Mortgage. If you're in the process of purchasing a home, trying to find the lowest rate in the market, or you just want to have some of those questions answered for you, give Clint a call at 803-771-6933. Once again, that is Clint Hammond of Movement Mortgage, same individual that our very own Wes Mitchell, as well as former Gamecock quarterback and captain Perry Orth, turned to. I know we have some questions there. I have a special guest, Joe. We haven't tested his audio, so hope everything will come out all right. Corbett, you're in the light. If you can move a little bit so we can see that face of yours.
Can you see me?
I can see Corbett. So Corbett is the unofficial mayor of 5 Points. He's been a long time man. I don't know where you are. Corbett's getting ready for the game, so it's a little loud there. Corbett, where are you? Getting ready to watch the game with a bunch of Gamecocks?
Yeah, yes, I'm in Village Idiot.
There you go. There you go. Corbett, we were talking about this throughout the course of the season. The reason I wanted to have you on is because you and so many fans, you guys understand what this team's all about, the passion.
Okay.
What excites you about this year's team in comparison to last year to get over the hump, to get to the championship?
Well, I think they have a very good chance. I think they do very well. I just need for them to hit a lot of threes. We've been missing a lot of threes in the last 3 games. So I need for them to be hot and realize just one thing. This is it. You win today, you play Sunday. You win Sunday, you win the national championship, and that's what it's all about.
Corbett, we were talking with our colleague Chris Wilbon that's out in Cleveland. He talked about some players to watch. He brought up someone that you told me last night you want them to watch, and that's Raven Johnson. What do you want Raven Johnson to do today?
I think she's going to play very well. I think she understands the gravity of the game, and I think she wants a ring. All of them want a ring. That's what it's about. Bring it on back to the house.
You mentioned some of the threes. I mentioned earlier with this NC State team, I want to see South Carolina come out, play some good defense right away, because at this time of the year, possessions are so crucial. We've seen them get into close games towards the end of some of these games the last couple of weeks. I bring that up, Corbett, to say, what do you want to see from South Carolina today? I mean, you mentioned the threes. Do you want to see good defense? Do you want to see them protect the ball? Is there anything in particular that really stands out to you, though, outside of the threes?
What I need for them to do is what they don't do a lot. They need to drive to the board. The closest score you ever going to get is driving to the board. You know, shooting threes is fine, but if you drive to the board, there's 1 or 2 things going to happen. Either you're going to hit that, make the points, or you're going to get the defender in foul trouble. And it's all about getting the defender where they can't do anything to you, and you can just have free reign after that.
This has been a real special year for this Gamecock team and everything that Don's been able to accomplish. And obviously the job's not done yet. Trying to make history, trying to become the 10th team in women's basketball history to go undefeated. They need to be able to win these next 2 games in order to do that. However, and I know you feel this way, all these awards she's been able to win. You've been watching this team a long time.
I have.
Not done yet, but where would you put this job? Where would you put this season on the job that Don Staley has done up against some of the other years in years past?
I think this is probably the best one yet, because basically you got a team that people know about the players, but they really don't know them. And we lost a lot of players to the WNBA in the last couple of years and stuff like that. So you have a young team, and I just don't think they're not afraid to play anybody. They play pretty loose. They don't play tight, and they really want this. So I think they have a very good chance of getting it.
We mentioned with Chris talking about the fact that I can't even speak right now, Corbett. This is what happens when you get the star like yourself on today. They're going up against Rivers. They're going up against Sanaya Rivers, a former Gamecock, part of that 2022 team. Obviously, didn't play that much in that Final Four season, but she's going up against her old team today. We mentioned some of the matchups. Do you want to see Full Wiley up against her? I mean, I'm sure South Carolina is going to throw multiple guards, but do you want to see Raven on her? Who do you want to see on her?
Well, I think they can put Full Wiley on her. I think Full Wiley hold her down. It's going to be real interesting today.
Any final thoughts before I let you go so you can grab a slice and get ready for the game?
Well, the only thing I got to say is I want Carolina to win. I think we will. And I don't know how many points we'll win by, but I think we'll have a hell of a guy during the game.
Well, there he is, Wilbin Corbett, the unofficial mayor of 5 Points. Appreciate you.
Thanks very much, guys. Appreciate it.
All right. Enjoy the game. Good to have Corbett on. See, this is the thing. When it comes to the FAMs, when it comes to women's basketball, South Carolina women's basketball fans, you guys know what the hell you're talking about. So it's always good to be able to have a fan's perspective. And, hopefully we'll be able to do more of that in the future. I got some questions from some of y'all, so I'll turn to it before we wrap up this show. We're about 40 minutes away from tip-off. Let's see. Chip says, your thoughts. Is this group not under pressure nearly the same as last year's group was? I don't feel like they are. And I know that's easier just said than done. But I really feel like with Dawn's demeanor, I mean, I'm sure some of you have seen that clip from yesterday, the lie thing that she was doing. It just shows me how relaxed she is. And we know Dawn to be relaxed in general, but once you get to the Final Four, and again, I've covered her for 8 seasons now. I've covered some of those championship years. You get to this point, it's natural for not just some of the coaches, but for players as well, to tighten up a little bit. She's keeping it loose. Now, obviously, she has the experience. It's 4 straight years that they've done this, right? 4 straight years that they've made it to the Final Four. On top of that, they've been here now 6 times because you also have the 2015 and 2017 season. So she understands it. The players on this team, they understand it. Someone like Cardoso, she's been there multiple times. I mean, you go back to when she first got here. I mean, this is all she knows, for crying out loud, is just getting to this point. So I think more than anything, they're back in the same situation that they were a year ago. And yet, because of everything else around them, because Caitlin Clark's there, because Paige Beckers is there, Gino Uriema, because all this other stuff's going on, despite the fact that South Carolina has a chance to make history, has a chance to become the 10th team in NCAA history to ever go undefeated in a season in women's basketball history. Even though that's at stake, people aren't talking about it as much, it feels like, from a national standpoint, because you have what's going on with Caitlin and Paige, and that's fine. Gamecock fans, I understand that maybe you'd like to see Dawn or some of the players getting more national coverage, and I totally understand that. But at the same time, too, at this point, who cares? Who cares? And the reason I say that is continue to kind of go under the radar. Continue to go under the radar. Continue to let all that external noise, which at the end of the day means nothing, let all that external noise continue to talk. Take care of your business on the court, because at the end of the day, you win these next 2 games, they're going to be talking about you. They're going to be talking a lot about you. And then you're going to have another banner at Colonial Life Arena. So let all that stuff take care of itself. Just go out there, play your game, then they'll talk a lot about you. That's just the way I look at it. Maybe some of you guys don't fully agree with that, but that's all right. That's all right. Got another question here. Timmerman35 says, do we keep them shooting from the arc or risk foul troubles forcing them to go inside? Mid-range won't be there with our defense. I think at some point, what you're going to see from NC State, and they're a team that I'm trying to get the exact number here because they shoot around 33% from behind the arc, which, you're looking at from a percentage standpoint. I mean, South Carolina is third in the country when you're talking about shooting threes. Keep going down here with NC State. I'll give you the exact number. So NC State shoots just under 33% from behind the arc. That puts them at 94th in the country for threes. They've attempted 694 and they've made 228. So I bring that up to say that, going back to what we were talking about before with Baldwin for NC State, River Baldwin, 6'5", grad student, that they're not going to beat you inside. I can't see NC State doing that, especially when you have Cardoso down low. And then, of course, we can just keep talking about some of the supporting players around her. And I say supporting in the sense that you have your center-on-center matchup, but you have Chloe in there as well. You have matchups where it doesn't necessarily have to be truly one-on-one. In South Carolina, because of all their talent, because of the way they rotate, it really reminds me a lot, and I know there's not a lot of hockey fans down here, but it reminds me a lot about hockey. And what I mean by that is because they have so much talent, they're able to really rotate in a way that a lot of other teams can't, because they don't have a bench that's as deep as what South Carolina has. So, Ashley Watkins, we can keep going down the list here. What are some of those matchups? God forbid South Carolina gets into foul trouble, and hopefully that's not the case. But what I'm trying to get at is, God forbid they do. God forbid Cardoso does, for whatever reason. They have the depth to be able to still be able to control the game inside the paint on both ends of the court. That's why I just can't see NC State really having much success if they try to go in the paint. And then on the flip side of it, I'm South Carolina. I'm hammering it down there. I know USC has been shooting the ball lights out from behind the arc. We mentioned it. Third in the country for threes. And I expect USC to shoot a lot of threes still. But at the same time, too, why not? Why not take a chance down low? I mean, that's the way I would set the tone. I would go in the paint early, give the ball to Cardoso, early and often, and force NC State to really collapse their defense on you. Because what happens when they collapse? Well, I mean, it's going to be able to open up some shots on the outside. Just pick your poison. How are you going to stop this team? That's why I just don't think NC State is going to be able to keep up with South Carolina. So that's number one. But I think NC State's not going to have a choice. I think they're going to have to try to beat you from the outside. And as I mentioned before, it comes down to playing good defense. It comes down to being smart, not fouling, not making and committing dumb fouls on the perimeter, contesting shots, and equally as important, being able to get those rebounds on missed shots from NC State. I mean, we talk about South Carolina should be able to dominate the game inside the paint on both ends of the court. You can't allow Baldwin or even some of these smaller guards or some forwards to be able to come up and clean up and be able to get some of those rebounds. So need to be able to do a good job on that. Do not allow South Carolina cannot allow NC State to have second chance opportunities in this game. It's going to happen. It's part of the game, but you need to limit that the best you can against a team like NC State. Because look, I'm saying all these things that South Carolina should be able to do. NC State wouldn't have made it this point if they're not a good team. I mean, and what they've been able to do over the last couple of years, like we were talking about, yes, they haven't made it to the Final Four in quite some time, but at the same time, too, this is a team that has gradually improved over the last couple seasons, made it to the Elite Eight in 2022 when South Carolina won it all, came up short in overtime against UConn. This is a team that is hungry, and you have to be able to be at your best. And as we've seen with South Carolina in some of the games this season, especially later in the year, it could be a tournament game, could be the SEC tournament. In some of these games, it's come down to a couple points. And that's part of basketball, right? I mean, at this time of the year, you're playing against some of the best teams. It's going to happen. But if you do if you do take a lead, 15-point lead, and runs are going to happen in the game, you have to make sure that you're not allowing teams to come back into it. South Carolina, that's the one thing more than anything that they cannot allow today. They cannot allow NC State to make a run late in this game. They just cannot afford to. So, again, come out strong, hammer away in the paint. If you can get Baldwin into foul trouble, it's even better. It's even better because we talk about the lack of depth that NC State has on their bench in comparison to South Carolina. If you want to get them into foul trouble, have at it. Go in the paint, try to get them in foul trouble, and then that's going to just really change everything because at that point you can do whatever the heck you want. I don't know what NC State would be able to do if they lost a big, especially losing a big early. Well, that's going to do it here for us. We're about 30 minutes away until tip-off. South Carolina trying to make it back to the national championship since, 2022. So it's not one of those first time in blah, blah, blah years. No, it hasn't been that long ago. This is what Gamecock fans expect. This is what the fams expect. But at the same time, too, can't take anything for granted tonight as the Gamecocks try to take care of NC State in the Final Four. Game's going to tip off for those of you that just need a reminder. I'm sure many of you already know, but for some of you that might want just a reminder, South Carolina, their game against NC State is going to tip off at 7 o'clock. That game is going to be on ESPN. NC State, 31-6 on the year, 13-5 in the regular season in the ACC. South Carolina, of course, 36-0, a perfect 16-0 in SEC play before going on to win the conference tournament title. 7 o'clock from Cleveland, ESPN. Be sure to follow Chris Wilbon. If you are a GC subscriber, he will have the live thread going. He is in Cleveland. He'll be able to tell you all the little things that you're not seeing on the TV. He does a phenomenal job, one of the best basketball minds when it comes to women's basketball. So be sure to follow him on Gamecock Central. Appreciate everyone that tuned in today. We'll keep these shows rolling. Hopefully we'll be able to do one on Sunday. But first things first, South Carolina trying to take care of the Pack tonight. Enjoy the game, everybody, and we will catch you hopefully later this week.